let's start. So let me uh, introduce Samyak. Samyak did his BMath in Indian Statistical Institute, and now he's at Stanford. He started doing math and ended up in statistics. And today he's going to talk about what you didn't learn in BMath, statistics that you didn't learn in BMath. I hope this is helpful for a lot of people. And also, I presume a lot of people have joined this talk through the Discord servers. And if not, do check out the server. And uh, yeah, Amit, you can start.
All right, thanks, Vignesh. Hi everyone. This talk is something which I've been meaning to give for a while now, thanks to discussions that I've had with friends from BMath over months and years, where I realized that there are a few very fundamental themes in statistics that, for some reason, we didn't cover. So you can replace BMath with your undergrad. I didn't want to be pretentious, but I thought, okay, let's just. So this is just my take on a few themes that I would think are quite uh, important and inform the way I look at statistics, and this is influenced a lot by the people I was with and even the people at Stanford. And the overarching theme is basic, a bit biased towards statistical learning, but so let's just jump into it. I think that my talk will be better if people interrupt, because I'm not very good at monologues. So if at any point you have anything that you'd like me to explain more, or if you're lost or anything at all, please feel free to interrupt. I think that's much better than waiting until the end. All right. So what is statistics? Uh, Statistics is what statisticians do, and perhaps we can leave it at that. I don't want to get into semantics about what statistics is defined to be, but uh, I mean, but it's still not. I mean, not everything is statistics, right? So we might want to go a bit deeper into this. So in this talk, I will basically be using. I mean, I'll basically give you a couple of examples, some random yarn from me, general ideas, and not many definitions. So this talk won't be as technical as the other seminars. Definitely not like the algebraic number theory crash course or whatever which is going on. But yeah, and this will be a bit all over the place. So uh, most of the ideas presented will be of importance in their own merit, even though they may not. They may or may not make sense in the overall flow of this talk. But a lot of the ideas are quite, uh, let's say, important elsewhere also. So when so there are a lot of words that are thrown around when you talk about statistics, right? So there are, I mean, some people say data science, machine learning, ML, or optimization. So these are in some sense different spheres of what you might think. Especially mathematicians tend to club all of these together into one thing, which is like, okay, that's statistics, that's not mathematics. But even among the field of statisticians, data scientists, there are some commonalities, some differences. I mean, there's no clear distinction between the different fields, but some words tend to have some extra meaning which other words may not have. So when we say statistics, uh, some things that we might do and be called statisticians are, let's say, model-based estimation and inference. Other things, other buzzwords would be high dimensional statistics, causal inference. Uh, I'm not going to get into defining all of these things, because that's, a bit out of the scope, and this is like a rabbit hole you can get in and never get out, and you're probably not that interested in everything. So, but I would like to distinguish it a bit with data science and machine learning, which are in some sense used in different contexts. So when we say data science, we'll usually refer to things like uh, integration with actual business systems or data analysis or other themes which are more commonly used in industry and may not be as what would you say academic. I'm not sure if I might mess up. I might piss off a few data scientists, but uh, and also machine learning is a bit more computational. There are other words like deep learning, reinforcement learning, which uh, you can't really say they're not statistics, but you'd probably put them more under the machine learning tag than under the statistics tag. Uh, okay. Does anyone have any more words that there or any questions at this point? Okay. So again, yeah, optimization. This is slightly different from what from the remaining three, I suppose, but there's a lot of overlap between optimization and statistics, and we use a lot of tools from this as well. All right, I shall go to the next slide. Yeah, so when I say model-based estimation and inference, right? So I'd like to draw so I'd like to explain two terms which are uh, in some sense a lot of problems which we definitely I and statistical learning people talk about is this idea of inference and this idea of prediction. What do I mean by these two terms? So when I say prediction, I say, let's say I get data x y, which is like so this is a pair x y, not necessarily real valued. It can be any space, and they're drawn from a distribution p. My I What I mean by prediction is I want to predict y given x, and inference is basically given some draws from some data from a distribution P, I want to draw some conclusion about P. So there are two ways of looking at a very similar problem. Tools which are used for prediction are used for inference. You can't separate these two, but they are two angles at which you look at a particular problem. And different tools are developed with different, uh, with different objectives in mind. So when we say inference, there are again a couple of things which you might want to do. So there's this idea of estimation in which so you draw data from a particular distribution p theta, and what you want to do is estimate theta or its properties. Uh, and I mean, so theta can be any sort of thing. So you can have, it can be like, okay, I'll assume that data is coming from a normal distribution and I want to estimate its mean or variance. Or I can say, okay, this is coming from some smooth function, non-parametric, and I want to estimate its median or something like that. Any sort of p theta, and you can estimate different parameters. And testing is another angle of looking at similar problems in which, so the way we phrase the question is, tell me if theta has a certain property. And so we look at these sort of problems differently. So prediction, inference, and under inference, we can talk about estimation and testing. So machine learning tends to be more about prediction. Statistics tends to be more about inference. Again, you can't distinguish these two terms and these two fields, but there are some fields which cover more of inference than others. So, and good inference can often lead to good prediction, but not always. Okay. So let me go ahead.
Can I ask a question? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Sorry. So when you mean the difference between machine learning and statistics below, you mean you can build predictors without really worrying about what P is at all?
Without really worrying about, I wouldn't say. It is important, but you're not really interested in establishing its properties. So I can be a bit loose in the way I deal with P.
Okay.
I don't need to have like strong modeling assumptions, or I don't need to really worry about P in the first place.
Okay.
I can still
Yeah.
do stuff, and I'm still a very good machine learning person, even though
Okay.
I don't care about P. Is
Okay.
the idea.
And inference is more about really saying what P is, or like.
Yeah, or
So,
anything. I mean, trying to draw conclusions.
okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, right. Okay, so all right. So let me give you an example of. Okay, so this is not. So this is how we would think of estimation in a decision theoretic framework. I mean, so what I mean, estimation is like, okay, how do we do it? How do we put it even semi-rigorously, or like put it in a flowchart? So I'll assume that Z is a data which is drawn from a distribution p theta. Theta is in some parameter space capital theta. So I'm not saying that theta is real valued. I'm not saying that theta is Euclidean. It can be anything, right? Uh, but I'm saying that, okay, so the distribution from which my data comes has some characteristic parameter, which is theta, and I might want to draw some conclusion about theta. So, or I might want to estimate theta directly. So, something like that. So, any of these things is what I would call a conclusion or a decision or an estimate. They're all very related ideas. So, how we tend to go about it is basically we'll try to define something called a loss function. So let's say you're trying to estimate a real valued parameter. A loss function could mean uh, the squared error loss between the true value of a parameter, if it were, I mean, if the model were true, or something like, okay, the negative log likelihood is something that it could be a loss function. So basically, the idea is this is some usually usually real valued scalar which I want to minimize. This loss function can be, I mean, it can depend on quantities that you know, which is the data, quantities that you don't know, which are unknown. I mean, depends on theta. Or, I mean, you shouldn't worry too much about trying to define loss functions at this point. I mean, the idea is basically just to introduce a couple of terms to uh, explain how we look at uh, I mean, estimation. So the idea is that, okay, the loss function is something that depends on a random value uh, and some unknown parameters or something else, and you look at expected value of that loss. You would call it risk. Sometimes people call the risk itself the loss, and then the idea is your estimator you can construct by trying to minimize a loss function. I mean, that's just the big idea. There's some loss, something, and I want to, my estimator is usually built trying to minimize a loss function or trying to minimize an expected loss function, right? So, yeah, so that's
It's
basically,
Samyak. I'm actually getting a few feedbacks. That can you keep the mic a bit away? Yes, there is a lot of feedback. So
there's an echo. Is this better?
I guess is everyone able to hear him?
Yeah, this is good.
Okay. All right. So basically, yeah. So that's just it. We define something called a loss function, which is something which I would like to minimize, and we develop estimators which try to minimize loss. And we since we don't know the true value of the loss function, since it depends on unknown parameters, or sorry, not unknown parameters, depends on random quantities, we look at the expected value of the loss function. We try to basically use the risk to use the risk instead of a loss function. Just so
Sorry, your
what?
voice was cutting out in the middle.
I think going
Yeah,
back to the old ways is better.
yeah, yeah. All right. Okay. Anyway, so basically, loss risk. We want to minimize loss or risk. That's all I want you to take away from this slide. Don't worry too much about what exactly a loss function or a risk function means. So what do I mean by a model? So a model is some hypothesis of the data generating procedure. In some sense, everything in statistics is made up in some sense, right? Because what is real in the world is basically some data observations, and we're all trying to model everything. So whatever we do in statistics is in some sense trying to explain real world phenomena, and we just use math to like explain like real truths which are out in the world and try to gain conclusions and stuff. So, but anyway, so when we do talk about model based inference versus model free inference or model free models, not model free prediction, model free inference, there are some things that statisticians tend to mean usually. So I'll give you an example of what I'll mean by model based prediction. So I'll say this would be an example pipeline. So we
I think
assume
we
a
have a
model.
question.
Okay.
Noam Chomsky. Is there a question?
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I don't think he's responding. You can carry on.
Okay. All right. So basically, model-based prediction basically goes. Okay. So let's say we assume a model xy coming from p theta. So we'll give some structure to p theta. So the idea is that okay, it comes from this class of distributions, and they're characterized by something like theta, and we'll try to estimate theta. We can build a predictor from theta based on, like, for example, the conditional expectation. And the theoretical guarantee is that when the model is correct, the estimation is close to the truth. So this is how model-based prediction works, right? So you first assume that a model is true, or you assume a model, whether it's true or not, we don't know, but you assume a model, build an estimator, and build predictors, and then what we know is that if the model is correct, the estimation. Versus how we would distinguish it from model-free prediction, which is I'm not really assuming any model from the data distribution. So it's just some p. I'll propose a predictor. I'll have a loss function which I'll try to minimize, and then my guarantee is that for any p, the predictor is close to the best one for that p. So is close to this is because uh, we're approximating the true distribution with the empirical distribution here, uh, because we only have n draws, say, from this distribution p, and uh, we're using that approximation to the true distribution p. So that is what we mean by the close to the best one for that p. But the best one is in sense of it minimizes this loss. So when we say it's the best one, it's only as good as the loss. Right? So this is what we'll mean when we actually say model free prediction. It's not that we don't have any data distribution or we don't have any loss function. It's just that we don't have too many strong assumptions on this P. So if anyone has any questions, please do. Otherwise, I'll have examples on the next slide to elaborate on what I mean by these two things. Okay, no questions. So I'll give you an example. So I hope everyone is, everyone knows what I mean by linear regression. So a model-based way of looking at linear regression is basically, all right. So here for me, xi is a p-dimensional numerical vector, say. So and yi is a single number. So x is in rp, xi are in rp, and yi are in r. So I'll say that the data comes from this model, in which is an additive model with beta is our parameter, which I want to estimate or I want to predict y, and this will work by I'll estimate beta and I'll use that to predict y. So if you look at the likelihood under the normal distribution of of the data, and then I maximize the likelihood, I get the estimator for beta, which is the least squares estimator, which is x transpose x inverse x transpose y, which is something which usually you see in your undergrad if you're doing math or even anywhere else. A model-free version is so let's say data xi and yi. Sorry, this is not y1. This is yi.
Can I ask a
They,
question here?
yes.
So in this model, in your example of this model-based estimation, so we have not assumed a joint for x comma y, right? We are just assuming this
This
linear.
is a joint. This is a joint, right? So
Um,
when I say model-based, x y together come from a distribution p theta.
right. So what is the joint here?
So the joint is that x comma y come from this distribution, which is
1 minute. In this setting, x is not a random variable. Epsilon i's are the random variable and y is a random variable. X is not random.
okay. I mean, so you can think of all right. So all right, you can think of that. I mean, I don't want to get into that distinction because it tends to go into. So basically, you think of
Yeah, my confusion was if you had the joint of x comma y, you could calculate the marginals of x, right? But how would you calculate the marginal of x from this information? But okay, if it's
yeah.
irrelevant, we can ignore it. Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
you usually do is okay. So why I suppressed something. So what this model is basically is conditional on x. All right. So what this model
Yeah.
actually is a model on x comma y, but what I've given here is only the conditional part.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
That makes a lot more sense. So this is like a class of models.
yeah, this is a
All
class of
with-
models, and
okay.
this estimator is conditional on the distribution of x. But I usually will assume that x is also random. But
Yeah.
the subsequent inference is conditional on x.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Right. Versus okay. So coming back to model free. So the model free way of looking at it is all right. So x and y come from some unknown distribution p. But I only want, so I'm looking at the class of predictors which are linear, and when I say best, I define it in terms of this loss function. And since this loss function depends on p, which I don't know, I'll look at the observed version, so which is close enough to the loss function which I actually want to minimize, and that will give me also the same least squares estimator. So basically, that there are different perspectives of looking at the same. So there are different perspectives of looking at regression, but which is why I suppose regression is also very common, very simple, and very important. Right. Any other questions? All right. Okay. So let me give you a couple of examples which I like go through. So from here, I've kind of explained a bunch of different terms which I wanted you to explain what I mean by like models, estimation, inference, etc. So now I'll come to two examples which I would like you to keep in mind for the rest of the talk. So let's say I have n data points which are in R cross R. You can think of it as okay. So I want to learn so the functional relationship between y and x. So it might be for inference, it might be for prediction. I mean, you still want to do the same thing for both problems. So basically, you just want to fit a curve to the data, right? So I mean, you can do linear regression, fit this line. You can do, polynomial regression with 2-degree polynomial, or you can do basically interpolate the data, and this will be my estimate for f. So I can do all these things. So the question is, I mean, what do I do? How do I do, etc. We'll come to that. But this is basically the setup of my first example, right? So I have y, x, both are in one dimension, and I want to learn the functional relationship between y and x, which can be important. My second example is very similar, but on the other extreme. So x here is p-dimensional and y is a single random variable. So I mean, I'm not you won't be able to see this, but y is like the first column of this huge screenshot. And again, basically the idea is the same: fit a curve to the data. And in fact, this is actually a real data set which I've been working on. So this an example would be uh, uh, measurements of metabolites which are done by mass spectroscopy from like blood samples of pregnant women. And the idea and what I'm interested in, why. So X is in 9,000 dimensions, which are like a series sequence of observations for different markers, and Y is the gestational age. So basically, what I'm trying to predict is at what stage of the pregnancy is the subject. So this is also uh, so you can do a bunch of different things. Earlier, I mean, the first case so you can use regression-based methods, tree-based methods, neural network-based methods. So all of these, what I'm not going to get into the details of all of them, but what they do is basically they'll give you an estimator of f, and different things have different pros and cons. So how do we choose between different ways of estimating? So this is where I'd like to introduce something which is called the bias variance trade-off, which I think is one of the most important concepts in which I would assume should have been done in one of the 4 statistics courses in BMath, but we don't cover. I am not. So everything that I'm talking about, I'll be talking about in the context of BMath, but I'm sure other courses also have similar things. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by the bias variance trade-off, and this is the neatest case. So let's say we have z, which is from p theta, and theta hat is an estimator of theta. So I'll say theta is a real valued parameter, and theta hat is some estimator which is a function of z. All right. So theta hat is theta hat of z. Z is random, and theta is a fixed unknown parameter. So you look at the expectation of. So the one on the left hand side is what I call the mean squared error, which is basically what I want to minimize. This is my error, and right. So the expectation of the difference between the expectation of the squared error between theta hat and theta. This neatly breaks down into 2 terms because of some cross product cancellation. So the first term is, you might recognize this. This is the variance of theta hat, and the second term is the squared bias. Right. So this, I mean, this is not at all hard. I mean, just open both the sides up and you'll get this. So the idea is that estimators, the error can be broken up into 2 parts, which is something called a bias part and variance part, which this extends to other loss functions as well. And I'll explain what I mean by these. I mean, in other contexts. So yeah, so in the non-parametric setup, we can also talk about we would replace what is on the left hand side by expectation of y minus f hat of x or something like that. All right. So coming back to my first example, so I'll show you what bias variance how they apply in both my 2 examples. So the first one, so we estimate by interpolation. So what is high variance? What I mean by that is basically that the fitting mechanism will fluctuate a lot, can fluctuate a lot. So let's say there are some small changes to the data. The estimate can vary wildly. That is what high variance translates to. So in my interpolating function, if one of these points was slightly off, then the interpolator would change much more than compared to a constant. So the one on the left has higher variance than the one in the mid. Low bias means that under I mean, what low bias would mean is that under ideal circumstances where you have infinite data, you will learn the true function. So if it did come from some, so if data came from some true distribution, your estimator does not have a systemic bias against that. So you will uh, eventually get it. So the one on the left has low bias because any function that you want, you will be able to get to that function eventually, I suppose. Or at least there's nothing stopping you from getting that function apart from data quantity and quality. So whereas, let's say you're restricted to the class of constant function. I'd say I'm only going to, my estimator will be constant depending on the data, basically just the mean of the y values. It has very low variance, but because I mean you change the data, it's not going. The estimator is not going to change as much, but it has high bias because there is structural problems to which you're not going to be able to ever approximate anything other than a constant function, or you're going to be quite far off from true function. So what we want to do is, in some sense, is like trade-off between bias and variance to get to low mean squared error. So so regularization is a word which I think is quite. I mean, it's one of the words which somehow is missing usual statistics in PMath. So the idea is regularization is a fancy way of saying, okay, I don't want my estimator to behave too wackily. I want it to be well behaved. So basically what that means is I'm trying to reduce variance. I might introduce bias in some way, but I want to regularize or make my estimator less wild. So for example, so in my second case, so in regression, so this, what my loss function, what my risk would be, the squared, so the risk would be the sum of squares between, so the difference between yi and the estimate xi transpose beta. A way of reducing, so this is an example, so a way of introducing a regularization term, or a way of introducing this is, so I'll introduce a penalty. So I want to minimize R and beta, right? So the way I build my estimator is by minimizing the risk. So if I add a penalty term which increases with beta, with the complexity of beta. So the more complex beta is, or the more less well behaved beta is, uh, the more j increases. So this is what I call a penalty term. So when I minimize the sum of these two, I'll try to get more. So I'll favor less complicated beta. So I'll design a penalty which introduces structure to beta hat. Any questions here? Does that make sense? So I'm basically, regularization is
Yeah, I
a
think
fancy
there is
way
a
of saying.
question. Someone raised a hand. You can unmute yourself and ask the question. Yeah, I don't think we
Okay,
can hear you.
okay, we can't hear you. So
Can you type it out in the chat? I can try to ask it.
so, so anyway, I think we should proceed, and Vignesh, if I mean, if they type the question out, yeah, interrupt.
Yeah,
So
sure.
anyway, so regularization, what I mean is basically uh, trying to control variance by not letting my estimators behave too crazily or behave too wackily. So this is an example in which I can do that. I'll add a term which is high for high complexity, or high, I mean, which is low for low complexity, so that prefers. So an example in the regression setup would be this thing called the ridge regression or the ridge penalty. So what I do is basically, so if you look back, so I'm trying to minimize the sum of squares, but I'm adding a penalty uh, which is very high for large beta. So the idea is I don't expect betas to be very, very large. If they're very large, something might be wrong, or I want to regularize towards smaller values of beta, which will have the effect of reducing variance as well. And the way I'll do that is by adding this quadratic penalty. And it, I mean, if you've done some convex optimization, you'll know that adding that penalty would be equivalent to minimizing the sum of squares subject to this restriction. So already you can see how this reduces variance, right? Because my beta hat can't, so my beta hat can't really roam around all of RP. It's restricted. So for each value of lambda, there'll be a particular value of C, which comes from convex duality. But this is in some sense what I'll do for regularization in multivariate regression. Right. So let me just go back. So here, what I haven't really explained how I would regularize in these concepts, but you can think of these also as I mean, you can add various terms which depend on higher derivatives, which are high for, I mean, if the function behaves, I mean, very wildly, you add a regularizing term which depends on the derivative. So we'll prefer smoother functions as compared to these. But here, this is another way of regularizing. This is usually this is in multivariate regression. Another variant of regression is something called the lasso, which is least absolute shrinkage selection operator. A mouthful, but so I just wanted to introduce this because I think this is a very important and useful tool which is all over the place in modern statistics and which I think people should be aware of. So the idea is basically that instead of here having an L2 penalty, I'll just add an L1 penalty. There's no closed form solution, but the difference between this and the previous ridge regression is that you tend to get what are called sparse solutions. So why is this useful in the context of multivariate regression? So in the example I gave you, there were 9,000 columns. So that means you're estimating beta, which is a vector of length 9,000 if you're doing linear regression. Without regularization, it's an underdetermined system, right? So there are many values of beta for which you'll get exactly 0 for the loss function, which is the summation yi minus xi transpose beta whole square. But once you add these regularization terms, it's no longer the case that it's an underdetermined system. I mean, there's usually a unique minimizer, and it's not. It also kind of spreads out the different coefficients stuff. So this is in fact regularization is the only way you can do meaningful inference in high dimensional settings. The L1 penalty has the added benefit of making a lot of those coefficients in the 9,000 long beta vector 0. So our estimator beta hat, on the figure beta hat is the usual least squares estimator, but our estimator beta hat will have the feature of a lot of coefficients being 0. So when I'm doing multiple regression with 9,000 different columns, I won't use all of them in my estimator. So that's something which is useful, right? So I basically said, okay, so regularization tends to help you reduce variance, and that's something that we want to do. how do we pick lambdas? How do we know which method of regularization to use? How do we know we did a good job at all? So this is, so basically I just gave you an example of what to do, right? In in an estimation setup, you don't want too complicated solutions. You want simpler solutions or less variance solutions, because that will eventually also mean less error. But how do we know if we did a good job or not? So I'm weaving through a couple of different themes here. Uh, they're all independently important. So so here I'll introduce this idea of validation and or cross validation. So coming back to the first example, uh, so the idea of validation is basically, so if I give you this data and where I'll ask you, how do I mean, I want to fit a curve to this. So in that sense, I'm trying to learn uh, f, which is the functional relationship between y and x. I can fit a linear, I can fit a line, I can fit a polynomial of degree 2, I can fit a polynomial of degree 100, or I can interpolate. But how do I choose between them? If my only, ideally, what I'm interested in is the true error, which is the expected value of y minus f hat of x. But since I don't know that, all I can use is the observed sum of deviations between, so y minus summation yi minus f hat of xi whole square. I can make the observed error 0 by interpolating, but that's not something I want to do. And if I introduce a regularization or a penalty term, I don't know which regularization or penalty term to use. So here I'll introduce this idea of validation, which is basically you choose a test set. So basically randomly choose a subset of your data. You fit a curve to the training set. So I will only use the black points to build my estimator, and I'll measure the performance on the red point. So my error metric will be uh, only based on a subset of the data which is in my test set. So in some sense, this is an idea which makes sense, right? Like, okay, how well an estimator performs uh, can be determined by how well it does on new data, which you have not used to build the estimator. So that's this idea of validation. So this is also, I mean, there's nothing special about the one-dimensional case. So if you have 10,000 dimensional data, you can subset a chunk of a few rows of their huge data matrix and use validation. So this then extends to this idea of cross validation, which is, so you break your data up into a bunch of different folds, and then for each fold, you evaluate performance based on the validation fold, uh, and you fit the data using the training fold. And then, so this image, I think, is it's like so. Any questions about this idea of validation and cross validation?
Sorry, can you repeat this? I didn't get the setup.
Okay, so you understand what validation means, right? So I'll basically
Yes.
randomly choose a test set which is independent of the training set. So what I mean by cross validation is basically I'll take all my data, I'll cut it up into 5 parts. For each of those parts, I'll so for each of those parts, I'll select that to be the test set or the validation fold or the test set. I'll fit my method on the remaining, which is my training set. I'll evaluate performance. So my performance will be some error metric, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'll cycle through these 5 different things. So what I mean here is, if the blue and the gray together form my data, only the blue, I'll only train on the gray, and I'll evaluate performance on the blue. Then I'll train on this combination, and I'll evaluate performance on this blue, I'll get, if I break the whole data into 5 folds, which is 5 chunks, I'll get 5 measures of performance and I'll average them. So that is what I mean by cross validation.
Okay. So the aim here is to just verify if the variance is low or not, right?
So basically, the aim is to verify if I did a good job in my. So the if the estimator I chose was good or not.
So even
So
with respect
that's
to
in terms
error,
of the error. I'm always interested in minimizing the error.
right? So how are you
Reducing
measuring the
variance.
error here?
So if I measure, so my error, so I fit my curve to the black points. My error is just okay. Is found by okay, from this curve. I'll estimate y, right? So given x, I look at the point y. That's my estimated value of y, and the true value of y is the red dot.
Okay.
And the error is okay. How far was my curve from the actual point in the test set?
Okay.
So I'll use that to, I mean, so sum of squares, for example, would be a way of measuring performance.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so right, so at the extreme, instead of chopping up into 5 folds, I can say, all right, each point I'll leave that point out. I'll train on everything else, and how did that? I mean, and how well was I able to predict this point, which I left out? So that's called leave one out validation. So usually the way in which we decide whether to use leave one out validation or not is just computational. It's like, okay, I don't want to fit 10,000 different, I don't want to fit my method 10,000 different times, so I'll only fit it 5 times. So that's this idea of cross validation, right? So again, cross validation, we use cross validation to basically select a class of estimators, right? You also can use cross validation to tune parameters in your regularization panel. So if you remember, there is one lambda in the lasso or ridge penalties, which in some sense is a scale of how much I want to penalize, and I can tune that by basically, all right, I'll do cross validation. For each value of lambda, I'll get how good my performance was, and it's not cheating, and they're comparable between different lambdas, and I'll pick the lambda which is the best one, and I can use that to perform final evaluation. Does, did this make sense? Maybe I should go back to the. So basically, I have this penalty here. So the idea of regularization is to reduce variance, which even at the expense of bias, overall will reduce error, hopefully. And how I do that is by picking a regularization term. The lambda there is something which I don't know which one to use. Or if I have 2 different methods of regularization, I don't know which method of regularization to use. And how I pick between methods or pick a parameter to tune is through validation or cross validation.
Okay. And
That's
all this works without assuming any model for your data.
right. All right. So I used, I mean, in some sense, the model is not required for my estimating mechanism. So you can look at all of this in a model-free lens as well. Or I can say, all right, but I can also look at it from like model-based methods as well. All right. So I'll assume that the true relationship between x and y was actually linear, and with some distributional assumptions on the error, and then I can try to derive these or try to get properties of these estimators in a model-based context as well. But you can look at this in a model-free way as well.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. So back to the bias variance trade-off. So what you'll usually see is that the error, which is, I mean, the expected value of, I mean, usually the true loss or the true risk, uh, as you admit a more complicated model, uh, the training error is basically, for example, the interpolation the training error would be 0, right? Because in my training set, an interpolator would have exactly 0 error because my error is the difference between the curve and the point. Versus in a validation set, you'd usually see a curve that, I mean, interpolators will tend to get unknown points or unseen points wrong. So this curve is an illustration of the bias variance trade-off. So for less complicated models, we tend to have high bias because we won't be able to get to the true model or anywhere close to the truth. But as we admit higher and higher complex models, we tend to see that in validation, it tends to be bad because variance is higher. And that's basically what, which is why we want to regularize towards somewhere in between. That story. Any questions? Okay. Right. So all so far everything that we've covered comes under this concept of supervised learning. So because you can measure how well we're doing, perhaps the goodness of it through validation error. Also, I mean, this is clearly not all of statistics. I mean, what? So there are a couple of other things as well, which I mean, so this is what we distinguish between supervised and unsupervised learning. Then these are certain problems which we would talk about in unsupervised learning. But yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the end of my narration. So, questions, comments, please. Anyone?
Yeah, Leon. Oh, it's not a raise hand. Fine. Yeah, does anyone have any question?
Yeah. So is the idea that idea why we want to like reduce the variance in our estimator, that error in our data should not cause a lot of variation in our estimator?
So this is usually, so these curves are what you see. So these are observed.
Right.
So the idea is that error is what we care about. The error, and so error, and what I mean, validation error is what we care about, right? So for new data, how well our estimator does is what we care about.
Right.
And this is something that we usually observe, that we have the more complex models we have, we'll see this U-shaped curve in validation error. And we explain this using bias and variance. So the bias variance trade-off is an observation which comes after we develop an estimator. So this is so this is how we explain that U-shaped curve. The U-shaped curve comes first. So the idea is, if we want to develop good estimators, we don't want high variance estimators, because high variance estimators, even though they may have low bias, they'll end up having high error.
Oh, okay.
So the error, yeah. So the estimator comes first, and then we see this. We want to reduce error, and we see that if an estimator has high variance, we'll usually have high error. So we want to reduce that variance. Even if bias increases a bit, overall error will reduce.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Is there any other question? Yeah, Adit.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, great presentation, Samyak. Just want to ask about that model complexity. So, in the graph, so like, are you like, I'm assuming you're like quantifying model complexity somehow. Like, how do you say one model is more complex than other? Like,
right. Okay. So this is something that I wanted to brush under the carpet. So there are different ways in which you quantify model complexity, and sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier. So in I mean, for example, in the two ways in which I presented, okay, so for example 2 is which is multiple relation. It's not that straightforward, but in this example, you can just think of it as, for example, the degree of, so if you say polynomial regression, you on the x-axis you just plot the maximum degree of the polynomial which you're willing to admit. So if I just say, all right, complexity is 3 if I am allowing third degree polynomials, complexity is 100 if I'm allowing 100 degree polynomials. That's also a valid way of quantifying model complexity, and you'll see the same curve there. In other contexts, there are other ways. So I mean, for different techniques, there are different ways in which you quantify model complexity. But even in the loose sense of the word, this is the kind of graph you'll see.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Thanks.
Is there any other questions? Yeah, if there is no more questions, let's thank the speaker once again. Thank you, Samir, for the presentation.
Thank you.
I'll end the meeting, and you can find the recording of this session. It will be uploaded to the YouTube channel. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great talk, Samir.